I'm exceptionally excited to be here today. My name is Kacie Lyn Kocher. I'm the Director of Organizational Design and Stakeholder Engagement, a huge mouthful, at Civic Hall Labs. I first wanted to start off by saying I'm particularly excited because I've been intersecting with civic technology in a multitude of ways throughout my professional career. It really started in 2010 when I was working in Istanbul. For somehow, I don't even know how, I ended up working at the telecommunications company, which was providing internet service for over 40 million people across Turkey. And so I was dealing day to day with issues of digital literacy rollouts for a developing country. How do you become competitive as a telecommunications if you're entering the EU market? What does internet mean if it's an infrastructure, but then it's also a human right? And then at the same time, as I was dealing with these things professionally from a telecommunications specialist lens, I was also starting a nonprofit that worked to It brought Hollaback's digital story sharing platform to Turkey. And so we were using crowdsourcing stories to break the silence on gender-based violence. And so in that, I was at the center of technology, community organizing, and civic engagement. Thereafter, I worked for two software companies that sold software to government. So there was a question about government procurement processes. I was intimately involved in those. And so we created 311 software for cities, 150 cities across the country, including Plano, McAllen, Vancouver, and Philadelphia. McAllen, yes. And so intimately involved in terms of government technology and what that can mean. And I am here to really complicate some things for you today. Civic technology is at a crossroads. It's at a really interesting part, partially because no one can actually agree upon what the term is. What does civic technology even mean? I have to explain my job and what civic technology is all the time because no one knows what it is and it's ridiculous. So we have to agree upon terms. Then, after we agree upon terms, there's numerous challenges that emerge. And so I really want to end this talk with a simple framework about how we should be understanding civic technology, and then really arm you with questions so that way you can have nuanced challenges to the things that everyone in this room has been telling you and will continue to tell you, and how you interact with civic technology into the future. Whew, what a task. Yes, how will I do this? This is what I'm doing. 3 quick things, which aren't going to be so quick, but we'll get through it together, I promise. What is civic technology? I'll go into the debate around what this term actually means. Second, I'll talk about the challenges to civic technology to develop as a field or an ecosystem or a practice. What does civic technology have to do? And then the last thing I'll do is arm you with those questions, as I said, that you should be asking, that we should all be asking, because in the end, it's on all of our shoulders to define civic technology and to wield it in a way that will empower all of us. And I hate the word empower, but I'm sorry I used that just now. So let's start off. What is civic technology? I first wanted to start off by breaking down this noun, civic technology. So first let's talk about technology. The definition of technology is the invention of tools, processes, and techniques that make it possible for humans to complete an action. Yes, technology is not new. It's not new at all. Language is a form of technology that we use to communicate ideas and emotions and knowledge. A doorknob is a technology that we use to enter between two separated spaces. And so I want a more nuanced historical lens when we view technology. The same in which as we view civic technology. So lending that definition, a little bit forward, these are tools, processes, and techniques that impact and enhance our public lives, our civics, our networks, our society. So from a gavel to a mobile app, those are all technologies that better enable us to engage, participate, congregate, to better act together. So most of us think that we're at this new cutting age of everything, and that's really not true. Historically, civic technology has existed. What is really new is the rapid proliferation of information technology and how that's really changed fundamentally our private lives. And so it's really this, personal mobile computing that has transformed business and how we interact with each other as private individuals. And so today's challenges in a lot of ways remain untouched by this digital revolution. And so it makes governments, citizens, students, practitioners, researchers, do-gooders, technologists, and entrepreneurs. It makes us want to bring those technologies from our public spaces to from our private spaces to our public lives. And so that's really what's new about civic technology as something that's emerging. Next, so I'm going to go through some major definitions and really show you why this has been really complicated. Oh, I'm sorry that's not working there. But so there's a really big debate on what civic technology actually means as a term, which has profound implications for how we use civic technology and interact with it, engage with it, and speak about it. And so civic technology in general is mostly localized. It's really hyper-local institutions and groups that are using civic technology, but there are a few broader national mainstream definitions that have tried to emerge but really haven't been able to. So Omidyar on the far left is one of the lead funders in terms of tech and innovation. And so the Omidyar network defines civic technology as civic engagement and government efficiency. GovTech in the center is a government technology publication and magazine that I read daily. It was my Bible when I was in government technology. And it defines it very differently. So it defines it as only when, civic technology is only when public lends its talents, usually voluntarily, to help government do a better job. So that really excludes any type of civic engagement in civic tech. I would say when I was using gender-based violence and connecting survivors of harassment together online. That doesn't count as civic technology, according to GovTech, one of the largest publications. Code for America, another big player in the field, kind of has this bucket list term. So civic tech means civic engagement, civic communications, improving government infrastructure, making government generally more effective, government efficacy. It's kind of all over the place. Like, what are all these things coming together as under? It's not that clear. And more than that, it's, so we don't really know exactly, concretely, concisely what civic technology is under language that we've all agreed upon. The next problem is, like, what does civic technology look like then? Who's actually doing it? Huge question, still outstanding. So the Civic Commons on the far left try to tackle this and list out, this database of civic tech projects and companies, but in the end they couldn't maintain their database. So there's a problem with how do you maintain this information, who's contributing to it. Similarly, the civic power sector in the center by My Society, which is a British nonprofit that builds technology tools, tried to categorize groups in a different way, hasn't really stuck in terms of how the field is using it. And then lastly, the Knight Foundation had a really highly criticized report that they released on civic tech trends. Data visualization was beautiful, I will say. But more than that, they included the sharing economy. So Airbnb was included as civic technology, which many people raised a red flag to. And the reason was because, that technology arguably is technology that benefits private lives rather than civics or a public good. So here we are. What are we even talking about at this point? The ambiguity is there. It's so palpable in this kind of emerging field of what is civic technology. And so institutions, people, leaders need to come together on this concise term of what this actually means. And the major sources of contention here are first GovTech versus civic tech. So if GovTech or government technology makes governments more efficient and accessible, sometimes people interact with that 311 apps, or if you're in a voting online or healthcare.gov. Those are ways that you are actively interacting with and using GovTech. But some of those are in the back end, so you never see them. So they're managing land or managing different assets or making governments more efficient on the back end. And so there's this huge relationship. How does that piece, how does the government piece fit in with a larger civics and a larger public life? I would argue, like many would argue, that GovTech is actually a smaller subset of a larger public life portion that we are all a part of, and that's Civic Tech. So that distinction has to be agreed upon, absolutely. The second is, like in the example of the Knight Foundation, Lyft, Uber, Airbnb counted as civic tech, but so those are private tech by private companies for people's private property, resources, and lives. So what is public about that, right? Next, Facebook, right? Does Facebook count as civic technology? No, it does not count as civic technology. It does have civic features that enable us to better connect, better engage, better whatever verb you want me to use there, participate. But it's not a civic tech. It has a civic feature, and so we really need to clarify what we mean when we mean private and public, and how does civic tech? What's the role in civic tech? Really tying out those nuances. The last thing that I will say on this is, like, what is it? Like, is it an ecosystem, a field, a marketplace, a movement, like what is civic tech actually? And so it's kind of all of those things right now because we really haven't agreed upon it. The first I will say, so in terms of a movement, the Omidyar Network, again, with an organization called Purpose, presented a study on civic tech at the Personal Democracy Forum earlier this year. And they described it as a movement and said, not sure why, but they did. And they said that one of the major things in order for it to actually become a full-fledged movement is a definition. People needed to agree upon a language and terms. So there are key players describing civic tech as a movement. At the same time, it's a field in terms of, people are specialized in civic technology. It's something you can be specialized in. So it's a field, and then it's also an ecosystem insofar as people are playing different roles across it and depending on each other and acting on each other in different ways, just as an ecosystem runs. And then, it's absolutely a market. So when I was at Excella, one of the GovTech companies I worked with, we had just raised $140 million in seed funding last year, 2015, and that was the highest amount of funding that had ever gone into a government technology company. So it's absolutely a field. I'm going to complicate this a little bit more because I think it's a practice. So this is, I'm testing this out, but this is like a new way of understanding civic technology, but I think I might be onto something. So it's a way of looking, of acting, of measuring. It's about building and deploying technologies with the communities that use it. And so I'll touch on that a little bit later, but, things are complicated, basically. How do we move forward for this? You're all asking me, Kacie, how do we do this? Enter Civic Hall Labs. So we are two organizations. I work with Civic Hall Labs, but we have the same mission. So sister organizations, same mission, advance the use of technology for the public good. We define civic technology as the use of technology for the public good. So our mission is to advance civic technology. Broad, I know, a very broad definition, but it speaks mainly to two things for me as a professional in the field. The first is that technology aspect. Technology is usually proprietary, the way that we've come to understand it, and so this is really using technology in a very new way. It speaks to more open source things. It speaks to really reimagining how we can use technology. For not just our private lives, but for our public lives. And then the second is this decline in public good. What I'm talking about is a paradigm shift away from a direction that we have been going, which has been a disinvestment of our public lives. So we can use technology to reinvest in the public good. I think that, you know, it's not really a wonder why people have a hard time understanding what civic tech is, because, you know, the public good, our public lives, technology for those public things, it's really undervalued and not spoken about that much. And so, you know, we as a society are disenfranchised because we don't know the vocabulary and how to use the tools that will make us better citizens and a better society. So I think that there are profound implications for coming together under one term, and I like my term best. I'm just going to say it. And so there are two organizations all achieving this mission in two different ways. So just briefly, Civic Hall is an actual space for civic technology. It's a physical, collaborative community and event space that within its first year had almost 1,000 members. Individuals sign up to be members. You can be a remote member, but you know, being there is really fantastic. But not just individuals, technologists, entrepreneurs, but at the same time you have governments as well. So the mayor's office, different mayor's offices are involved in our members and participate and hold events, but that at the same time technology companies like Microsoft and Google are also, and local nonprofits are also members as well. So it's an actual physical space where you can talk and discuss and have these ideas and serendipitously meet people and create programs together. One approach to advancing civic tech. Second approach is what we do, which is we're a research and development nonprofit that builds technology for the public good. And I'll get into our programs just kind of organically. I don't want to give our spiel. But I'll just get through our programs and talk about how we are really trying to target out the challenges that civic tech faces through our programs. The first such way that I'll weave in our programs is one project that was done. It was a research project called the Civic Tech Field Guide. This was presented really twice in the past year by Mika Sifri. He's also a co-founder of Civic Hall and Civic Hall Labs, Matt Stempeck from Microsoft, and my colleague Aaron Simpson. And they wanted a unique approach to categorizing civic technology that really shed new light. They wanted a bottom-up approach to civic tech because civic tech, after all, is about us. It's about people. So they thought that the problem with civic tech was that people and organizations didn't know where they were going. It helps if you have a map. So this is what they did. They wanted to map out civic tech. They started by looking at hundreds of tools and companies that existed under the umbrella of technology for the public good and created a taxonomy around them through different titles. So this one is the common features. And so I just wanted to run through some quick examples so you can see more tangibly what civic tech can look like. So under digital communications channels between constituents, representatives, trying to improve the feedback loop. We've heard a lot about feedback loops today. So then they looked at examples of that. So these are some examples. PopVox, Countable, all of these are channels that are live and have been created that try and solve for this common feature. They share this one feature of civic technology. The next is issue reporting platforms. So platforms that enable residents to notify their governments of items in need of attention, often municipal. So public stuff right there was one of the organization or the companies that I worked for. So 311 software is usually what that's called. And it's more than that, though. It's more than the tech features that these things have that make something civic tech. It's also about the people, the activities, the places, the processes that are involved. The human aspect needs to be documented as well when we're looking at how do we define civic tech. And so they listed common social processes that civic tech tools and companies facilitate. So different forms of convening, informing, building, agitating, codifying, and supporting. And so I will just go back to the physical gathering spaces because I think a lot of times we get caught up, but I really appreciate that this has been a theme throughout the morning. We get caught up on like the digital world and like Facebook groups and things like that, but I really do think that the physical gathering space is really essential to civic technology thriving into the future. And so these spatial dimensions allow people, ideas to collide, programs to be built, collaboration in events and discussions, and I don't want that to be underplayed. The physical realm is really important in civic technology. So like any great brainstorming, or any great kind of brainstorming session that, it ends in a Google Sheet. So everyone in this room can participate in this Google Sheet and contribute to the Civic Tech Field Guide. It's a live, living document. Organized Civic Tech is the bit.ly, and you can look at it now, you can interact with it, you can add Civic Tech that's not in there, you can add questions to it, and it's an ongoing list of, really defining who are players within the field of civic technology, and in a way that's not America-centric, in a way that's, inclusive of technologies abroad as well. But that still doesn't get at what civic tech actually is. It's kind of a list of things that it could be. And so I wanted to go back to this idea that civic tech is a praxis. So as we develop taxonomy of civic tech tools and organizations, the real value in civic tech is in its development as a practice. It's not about the tools, it's about the people. And so the application of civic tech methodology, norms, standards across problems it's wielded to solve. So if we view civic tech as interdisciplinary across the fields of education, justice, democracy, health, the environment, and we collect the best practices together, we create civic tech as a practice, just like journalism or urban planning is a practice. We create it as a practice, and it makes itself a more durable, applicable, practice, but it also makes those fields better, because we're able to cross-pollinate and cross-share. And so Civic Hall Labs actually works across, that's how we understand civic tech, and so we work across different sectors, fields, government entities, nonprofits to concretize a practice. And we see civic tech as crucial. We really need to define this, and we really need to set up a framework for what civic tech is in order for practitioners across any discipline to be able to apply it effectively and ethically. So really, in order to do that, I just wanted to point out a few challenges that civic tech has right now that really needs to be solved. The first one is that, hey guys, we're working in silos. Let's stop doing that. So technology is built right now. It's not new, right? Like technology has been built by public agencies, by community groups, by foundations, by private individuals, all to enhance, public good. So from, targeting issues of nutrition of children, making it easier to register to vote, documenting housing violations from landlords. All those things technology has already been applied to, but it's been applied in silos. It's been developed in silos. And so we need to do this with a streamlining a methodology that can work across these different disciplines. We need to apply iterative human design-centered thinking, human-centered design thinking to the problems of today through working with stakeholder groups of government agencies, local nonprofits, technologists, foundations, and other relevant experts. And we need to take them through a similar process of building with the public, not building for the public. And so this is the methodology we use across our theme-based labs. We have a health lab and a justice lab. So through pulling together, best practices, lessons learned across different fields, we're going to help concretize civic tech as a practice, and it absolutely needs to happen. Second challenge is ethics. So like journalism, urban planning, and international development, civic tech needs to come together to form concrete ethics, values, norms, and norms. And so we need to create an ethical framework to manage our activities and our methodologies and our outcomes. I'll just bring up two parts of this. The first part, which is actually, there's a lot of momentum around this, which is fantastic, is the build with mentality. And so it's essentially technology and programs have often been put on people rather than been built with people and with considerations of them as the users or participants within these technologies or programs, larger government programs or public programs. And so there's a thing called civic user testing groups, where there are smaller groups that local communities that are able to actually test out the technologies that are being developed, so that way their input is fed back in to the technology itself, so it's developed with. I argue, though, that that's not just about building better technology, that's also ethics. We should ethically be doing that. The other part of this is, so build with is something absolutely I would encourage looking more into. The second part is inclusion. And so it's not just about, testing the product, it's about an inclusive process. And that needs to be a part of the ethical framework. So who's developing, funding, managing the program and product? All those things matter. Who's maintaining the product? That matters. It needs to be done within an inclusive lens and framework. And so it's, we know diversity in the tech field is a really big problem, and the white bro tech culture bleeds into the technologies that are being created, and those biases are in the technologies like Facebook and Twitter that we use. And so when we use those things, and when people from different non-white tech bro experiences are like, hey, I'm getting harassed online, these technologies weren't built with those experiences in mind, and that has profound effects. And so we need an inclusive process along the way, especially because these things are with, are for the public. They're for us. One way that we are doing that is increasing, diversity and empowering. I'd use it again. Helping. Helping solve the digital divide between the public and the private is we have this Delta NYC pilot where we're bringing together teams of digital professionals where they volunteer their talents and skills in pre-scoped tech sprints. So they're 4-week-long tech sprints where these technologists who are freelancers or they work at Etsy or ClassPass, they're coming together and they are helping nonprofits really solve local problems that they actually have. So it's one way of including nonprofits in a process to build out technology that helps benefit them and the communities that they serve. The other thing that I would mention is that in these themed-based labs, we're also building out what does an inclusive stakeholder process look like, and that's something that I'm intimately involved in and would love to discuss later on. Challenge 3 is on funding. So earlier I spoke about Excella's successful funding round, but really there's not enough funding that goes into civic technology and government technology. And you might ask why that is, and I have a few answers for you. The first is we actually don't have that many metrics or understandings in terms of what successful civic technology looks like and what has failed civic technology look like. And so without that, investors actually being not very risky people are not going to fund a lot of civic technology because they don't actually know that much about the field. And so the Civic Tech Guide that I was talking about before is one way to actually chart out and begin to understand what does success look like in civic technology, but then also what does failure look like and how can we learn from those lessons, which is incredibly important. The next one is alternative business models. And so you'll see social impact investment, and the social impact community has done a lot of work into understanding what a double bottom line is. So not just what the profits look like, but what does the effect on community and society look like? Civic tech practitioners need to be more involved in those discussions in order to realize, what does the public good look like, and how can we build organizations, technologies that service both when that needs to happen. The other question is on scalability. So civic tech innovators, which in the next panel, and my organization also calls them civic innovators, they're not one type of person. They're not one, innovation doesn't look one type of way, even though that's the meta-narrative that we are under. And so, we really need to think about and have a more nuanced idea in terms of what civic tech scalability actually looks like. Large innovations aren't just like multi-million or billion-dollar industries. Large innovations can be, hey, I created this healthcare, tech small intervention, and then it's taken over by a large government or a nonprofit entity. And that is something that is scaling a technology for a larger public good. That's scalability. And so we need better models that are able to adopt and help civic innovators get from the idea to institutionalizing in some ways their products and ideas. And then finally, what are alternative ways of funding? And that's actually something that we've been doing. I was helping run the past few months, an innovation challenge. So we micro-granted $10,000 to 10 teams with 6 months of advising for teams that gave us ideas, prototypes, technologies that made a healthier public. And so we are testing out a new means of injecting capital. Like $10,000 isn't that much money. So injecting a small amount of capital and advising and realizing and testing out some assumptions through the advising period. What are the pinpoints of advising look like? What is the technology or the capacity building that we can do to help them actually build out their ideas longer term? So that's something we're looking at intimately. My last challenge for today. So, the innovation challenges, and we also are running a civic accelerator. Those bring up larger questions into what is civic participation and what counts as civic innovation. And so we're looking at enhancing business models for organizations at the intersection of civic technology and their respective fields. And we're looking at, as I just said, looking at alternative funding, capacity building models, but that's really a top-down look. And so let's look about bottom up. What does that actually look like? What does civic innovation look like on that front? And so if you do that, our civic accelerator is really centered on people. So it's a mix between a continuing education program and a more conventional accelerator. But it's really harnessing the ingenuity of local residents and the power of technology to service the government and our public well-being. And so our Civic Accelerator program is community-sourced innovation platform that really works with local residents as civic inventors and civic entrepreneurs. So we do part-time trainings on design thinking, prototyping, startup methodology. Looking at our Healthy Public Challenge, so we are, the people and the organizations that entered into the challenge were actually nonprofits. We had city agencies, which was a little terrifying, enter in, designers, students, doctors, individuals. When you look at our Delta NYC, who's participating in those things, those are technologists from places like Etsy. So really, and freelancers. So really all of us have an ability to engage, to be a part of civic innovation, and what are the things that we need in order to actually engage effectively. So the last thing that I'll leave you with is some questions that just reiterate some of the points that I made here today. So when you're looking at civic technology, I want you to think in the back of your mind, what does scaling mean actually? What are the specific technological intervention points? This third one, how do we design for bias? So we're all biased and the technologies we built will be built with biases in them. So how do we design for them? How do we account for them? How are we designing for bias? What does success look like? Who's not here in the process that should be? And how does the tech we build reflect ourselves? And so I just wanted to, on that note, thank everyone for your time today. I look forward to connecting, strategizing, problematizing things with you, both in person and online. So do connect. Thank you.